All right. So we're constantly trying to connect as much as we can between peace and justice, right? So wherever there's justice, peace will hopefully prosper. Wherever there's a lack of peace, we could probably find some sort of lack of justice. So maybe your generation, more so than others, has a pretty keen understanding of how the environment's connected to the human person, and how the environment has the threat of the environment is also a threat of the human person. A little harder for people my age and elsewhere, because not that you don't follow science. I'm not saying that, but that you didn't grow up with the same sort of uh, ethos that's been in the air. So a little more difficult, but nonetheless, we're going to talk a little bit about this today and exactly how these two things connect, and then we're going to look at it from the beginning as an economic issue that developed within Catholic social teaching, and then how that then with Pope Francis developed into an environmental concern. Okay, we'll leave it at that for now. In the late 1800s, 1893 to be exact, an encyclical came out. So an encyclical is like a circular letter that comes out from the papal teaching. And the title of it was Rerum Novarum, which is just Latin for new things. So anybody have any idea what the new things might have been that's going on in the world in the late 1800s and early 1900s? Anybody want to venture a guess?
The Industrial Revolution.
Yeah. And with the Industrial Revolution, right, you had the real growth of business. There was something else though, like what else was socially going on, say in Europe at the time, particularly in Germany with some German philosophers. Anybody
The
put that
Protestant
together?
Reformation?
Well, that's a little earlier,
Early.
but okay. Um, no, I'm talking about the rise of socialism and such, right? So we start to see these two things coming up. Now, we're not going to delineate exactly what is capitalism and what is socialism. We're going to kind of leave all that off to the side. We'll talk about them, but I'm not here to try to iron them out. But I guess the point that I'm going to make is not only does this document address those things, but these new things aren't so new for us. So a lot of what the document was supposed to address as injustices going on, we're still finding those today, which is why we're starting here, and it's a segue into Pope Francis's document. Now, I grabbed two quotes out of Rerum Novarum. And this first one is, the richer classes have many ways of shielding themselves, and they stand less in need of help from the state. Whereas the mass of the poor have no resources that they don't fall back upon, must chiefly depend upon the assistance of the state. Okay, so you can even think of what's going on with COVID-19 right now, right? A lot of businesses are being affected. A lot of persons in their households are being affected. And to be quite honest, people that have some sort of means are not going to, put it this way, in a positive way, they're going to be able to weather the storm much better than those who do not. So this gives the impression, like a weight towards like a socialist point of view, like the state has to be there to capture those that fall through the cracks. And that's true. But there's another side to this that would give you a different impression if you read this first. The Pope says, we saw that the state must not absorb the individual or the family. See, the individual and the family, especially the family, is a basic unit, right? So from Catholic social teaching standpoint, it predates the state, which means that there has to be a certain preference given to the family and how they function. So the document goes on to say, both, that is the human person and the family, should be allowed free and untrammeled action, so far as it's consistent with the common good and the interest of others. So what you find is not an issue with being a Republican or being a Democrat, but it becomes very difficult to hold those positions absolutely. And it's not a middle ground. That's not what we're talking about here. It's just that there's a problem with big business and there's a problem with big government. And the reality is the problem is that they're big. The minute that something has that sort of size, there's always power that goes with it. And power doesn't tend to do well with the human person, especially with families. Those that have it try to keep it. Those that don't have it want it. And then when somebody gets it, they would just want more of it. So there has to be like some sort of balance through here. So Rerum Novarum saw there was a lot of issues that were going on and it needed to be addressed. This is sort of like the hidden gem of Catholic social teaching, because we hear the term social justice today, and I don't really like the term because it doesn't have the same meaning it had. but it really came out of Catholic understanding of the human person from the early 1800s and was developed through this document and then grew throughout the 20th century. It's really been ideologically co-opted today, but we're going to leave that to the side. I do my best to not get into the partisan dictates of it. So what I want to do is real quick give you an introduction to the 7 themes of Catholic social teaching and just talk to you a little bit about them, and then we're going to move on. The first theme is life and dignity. Now, usually from an outside point of view, or maybe within Catholic social teaching, people immediately think of abortion. That's part of this, right? But it's part, and it's all it is. But you already know my dislike for slogans, right? Pro-life doesn't encapsulate what is the issue here. Neither does pro-choice encapsulate what's the issue for that community. But this has to be the life and dignity of the person on all stages. So, ideally, and we talk about this seamless garment, right? This idea that if a person's opposed to abortion, they should also be opposed to the death penalty. They should also be opposed to anything that dismantles the family, no matter how you want to understand that. They should be opposed to war, not if it might be just in particular circumstances. I'm not here to argue that. But they should be concerned about cloning. They should be concerned about anything that threatens the life and dignity of the human person. And economics, obviously, is going to be part of that. So, if somebody were to just spend time in the first aspect of this theme of Catholic social teaching, you would not find yourself in one political ideology. It would almost be impossible to stay within it. Okay. Now, community and participation. This has to do with everything from economic development, which we'll talk about, to marriage and family. And, how does that unit understood? And if that unit is understood differently, how does that translate into other aspects of social teaching and how the person be affected? How do we form our particular responsibilities in the civic sphere, right? So participation means that you have a moral duty to participate in the civic, let's say, the civic plans of your country. Now, what that means is that you have to participate and you should vote unless your vote is your lack of vote is participation. In other words, it could be that you are in a sense objectifying what's objectionable to what's going on in the political sphere. So you saying I refuse to participate is a participation. I know it sounds odd, right? And that's not the same as apathy. It's somebody I have something better to do on Tuesday, right? So that's all part of it. So we're responsible for the people that are there. Maybe not for every blessed thing they do, but certainly for the stances that we have voted them in for. Rights and responsibilities. I'm not going to go into this too much. Remember, we already talked about where rights come from and the difference between rights and licenses and privileges. So once we understand the inclinations of the human person, pursue truth, avoid evil, to do good, avoid evil, pursue truth, live in relationality, concept of preserving life. All those things, they form duties that we have to preserve our life, to pursue truth. And then the rights have to enshrine those things. So what happens then is that these rights then become imperatives for us, and we are responsible for them. So we can't, step outside of this sphere and pretend these are all connected, by the way. You should see a connection between this and civic participation. So there's no way for us to get out of our responsibilities to others. It's part of what we call the common good. And it's one of those terms in Catholic social teaching that has to do with the entire sum of conditions that are necessary for all of us as human persons to flourish. Whatever those things are, we're going to contribute to those. And we're going to see, at least today, that the environment itself is a common good. So that's something that we all have to work and strive for. The option for the poor has to do with a little bit of the fact that, from one of those quotes, an individual or family that does not have financial means, they don't have the ability to weather certain tragedies and circumstances like a person with wealth would. So they have to come first, because a person, particularly in a pandemic like we're in, means are going to have a way to get through this. And even if they lose a bit of their income and their stocks go down, in the end, they're going to have enough and be sufficient upon themselves to take care of themselves and the family. Those others that are not so fortunate or in financial status that will help them to endure it, are going to come out of this weathered at the very least, if not perhaps financially destroyed. And even if people manage to get through all of this, it's going to affect their lives in very direct ways. And if you know people that don't exactly have the means to take care of their health in the way they should, they have X amount of dollars, and these are the health situations of their family, you'll see parents going without, dental work or routine checkups or not bothering to follow up on certain tests because they only have so much money to outlay for their deductible or perhaps their copay. So they take care of the children first, right? So all of that is, built into this, which means there's a role for the state. But the state can't take care of everything. We're in this together. We'll get back to that. As far as the dignity of the workers, just think of terms like workforce. It's very impersonal. It almost makes it sound like the person is a product and they're only there to produce some sort of financial gain for the owners or the people who might perhaps be in charge of the entire organization. So the whole idea of unions falls into here. Now, this kind of cuts both ways. A person here at St. Joe's University, we're not employees of the Catholic Church, but I can assure you that elementary school workers and such in diocese, but when they don't have the unions, they'll get crushed. And it's not because the Catholic Church is big and evil. It's what happens. In businesses, if a particular business didn't have a union, you would see the same issues that Rerum Novarum's addressing just reoccur. You would see that the workers would use the owners would use the workers for nothing more than gain profit. So child labor laws, work hour weeks, that you can only work so long and then after that you have to be paid overtime. Those things were not just good ideas. Those things were corrections for abuses that were going on very early in the century. So the dignity of worker is that work brings the individual dignity because you're participating in the very product that you produce. You see that a little easier in vocations, right? So a person who welds, a person who makes an art product, they can see the work of their hand. It's a little harder once you start being part of a system. You only get to see like your contribution, perhaps not even the end product, but nonetheless, here's the thing with unions. If unions weren't there, I already said that the worker would get crushed. So the Catholic Church supports unions and the necessity of those. The only thing that's going to give people decent working conditions and good wage. But it could go the other direction too. We've seen that. In other words, the union could be so concerned with the level of wage and the benefits of the worker that they forget how this could affect the health of the particular company. Now, I have a relative who worked for Donnelly Printing, so phone books. If you guys remember phone books, when I used to get them, they would print all these up, and it was a very repetitive type, job, but nonetheless necessary. So back in 2008, when the economy wasn't doing too good, the company said, "Look, we're here to renegotiate with the union for the next contract, and here's our deal." They said that we'll keep everybody's wage as it is, so no reduction in wage. We'll guarantee you work for 3 years, but we do need 2 concessions. We need you to, one, drop down an hour of work per week. We're normally 40 hours. We want you to contract to 39. And we also need you to give up one of your vacation days. And I think it was a holiday, actually. So I remember my relative talking to me about that and was kind of upset because, the idea with unions is once you give in to any of their concessions, you never get them back. So when he told me about that, I said, well, I hope you accepted it. And he said, well, no, we didn't. I said, in this economy with the rise of unemployment and all you're being asked to do is to give up 1 hour a week plus a vacation day. And in return, you're going to have a job for 3 years. You should have kissed the hands of the person that offered you that. But they didn't. They fought it. And within the year, the place closed down and went south below the border. So they all lost their jobs. So there was an instance where the union was not working in the best interest of the overall complex. They were saying, we're only going to do what's best for the worker, not kind of realizing that the place to work is best for the worker. So this all falls under dignity of workers. So, we could talk about living wages and what that should be and such, but just the fact that we're, addressing all those issues falls under this theme. Solidarity is a notion, and this is very important you get it if it shows up on any of your and then final. It's not an interconnectedness. I mean, it is that, but it's not just that. It's an interdependency. So we're getting that now, again, with this COVID-19, how we're all connected, right? We can affect each other literally with a virus. But the reality is that we're connected as a people overall, even on a greater level. So it sounds cliche to say that there are no races, we're all just one human race. But that's exactly what this means. Solidarity between ethnicities, between various economic classes, between age groups, between racial classes. Now, it's important to not hear in that being being a proponent of solidarity doesn't mean that you don't recognize that there are these injustices going on. So when somebody says that there are no races but one, that's not to incur that there aren't racial disparities and there are problems with interracial relations. So to say that we should be one race is not to say that there is not problems. It's saying that we have to at some point connect ourselves on this level. So if the person who has means can connect themselves to the person who doesn't, if all races can get together, all ethnicities can get together. I mean, I know it sounds very cliche and almost idealistic, but if we can understand that we're all, put it this way, you guys know Anthony Hopkins, the actor. He's quoted as saying, whether he said it or not, isn't the point. It's a good quote. He said, "None of us are getting off this plane alive. We're all in it together." It's the truth. None of us that are here today are going to be alive in 110 years. None of us. So we're in this together. What good does it do for one of us to try to make profit or to get something up on the other person? If we understand that we're all in it together, we would work through things differently. And how this goes back even to the dignity of the workers, there's nothing to do with people who would take risk to not have some sort of benefit for what they've done. But how much? I mean, do we really need CAOs making, multi-millions of dollars, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars when the worker might be making $10 an hour? You guys know Ben and Jerry's ice cream? They don't own it anymore, but the two guys, Ben and Jerry, they made a pledge at the very beginning that they would never make more than 9 times the lowest paid employee. How cool is that? So if they had an employee that was making $10 an hour, they made 90. And if they wanted to make 150, then it was time to ramp it up below, right? So they were still able to make a comfortable living and quite honestly, live a lifestyle that most of us would dream for, but they still did it with dignity for their workers, right? So it wasn't at the expense of their workers. Okay. The last part, and then I'll take a couple questions if there are any, is stewardship of creation. So this is kind of where your faith and your relation to the world kind of meets, right? In other words, it would be hard, which it always boggles my mind, that a person who professes some theistic or Christian religion doesn't see how the world is we're part of the same world, that was all part of the same creation. And that what happens to the world happens to us, right? So this isn't about saving the planet. That was a popular phrase back in the 80s and 90s. To be honest, it's ridiculous. The planet would be perfectly fine. All human persons were good to go extinct within, 20 years. The planet would, just swallow it up. Plastic. We're destroying the environment that hurt the inhabitants who we are. But in all reality, George Carlin, a famous comedian, I'm using his line. He said, far as the earth would go, within 500,000 years, we could swallow all the plastic up and just turn it into something else, and it would continue, right? So, that gives us a connection that we're not just here to save some sort of abstract part of nature. We're here to actually save something that we're part of. And that's how we're going to end this. So I want you to start thinking now. I have a video I'm going to show you towards the end. How is it that we understand our connection to nature? Why is there a spiritual connection between how we see our relationship to nature and how nature relates back to us? Why do people who perhaps call themselves spiritual, not religious, find a real connection with trees and the sun and the ocean? Why is it that all of these, and I'll reiterate this, why is it that sometimes these famous quotes or these maxims or inspirational sayings, every time they show up on a poster, behind them is always a waterfall, a rainbow, clouds, an ocean. What is it that we're connecting between beauty and truth and nature? I'm going to start thinking about that and why people are like that, and we'll get back to that in a minute. So anyway, any questions on Rerum Novarum or the 7 themes of Catholic social teaching? No? Okay. All right. Now, depending on how you view the creation of the world, and you already know the Catholic Church fully embraces an evolutionary model, as long as we understand that, God is the worker behind all of this. So the process, we're going to let science tell us how the process went about. We're quite comfortable. But a danger if is that it is true for me, from a Catholic social justice standpoint, that the human person is premier amongst all creation. So there's this, ancient philosophical idea called the chain of being, where you start with everything that exists has being. So you start all the way down at the bottom with, inanimate things, rocks and such, and water. Then you would start to go up to animals, and then plant life, the human person. So is the human person the apex of all this? Well, the Catholic Church says, well, yes, but what does that mean per se? That doesn't mean that we're not part of the very creation that we and are the inhabitants of. What I mean by are we inhabitants on the stage? We can't have this idea of the exemplary human person. In other words, all of the earth and the universe was created, and when God was done, He said, "Isn't this cool? Let me put some people on it, and they can do what they want with it." This idea that somehow we've walked onto a stage and we don't have this intimate relationship with the environment. So, a stage is something that's, created and artificial, and the human person is almost like imposed on it. That's not true for our understanding of the environment. We're not imposed on it. We're part of it. We're embedded in it. We can't just see ourselves as actors that are playing out on this particular stage. It's integral, and we're gonna wind up at the end talking about an integral ecology. All right. So when we hear words like to subdue the earth, that's perfectly fine, and it's biblical language, but we just have to make sure that we don't understand that as in controlling with impunity, right? Just because things are here doesn't mean that we can use them in any quantities without having some sort of damaging effect, not just on the environment per se, but how the environment interacts to us. So we're gonna see how this is really a call for a change in lifestyle, which has been my focus the whole time, is that I'm perfectly content with people working towards regulations that are necessary. But if we're going to rely on other things to be regulated, we're not going to see our own contributions. And then we're not going to be any closer to, being connected to the very nature that we're trying to protect than a person who would consider themselves an environmentalist, right? That type of issue. So up in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, you see the encyclical name of Laudato Si that Pope Francis put together. So what he was talking about is just like Rerum Novarum said, there are new things, and you're addressing the impact of the economic sphere, both in laissez-faire capitalism and classical socialism on the human person. This does the same thing, but in terms of the environment. In other words, he's saying there's a need for a change, all right? Some things have to be looked at differently, and it's going to require almost not just a refocusing, but a reorientation for a lot of us as human persons. He says, first of all, if we're going to talk about some sort of change or conversion on a religious level, we're going to have the switch from having a domain over everything, to an interconnectedness, right? So maybe, and we can even say a solidarity with nature itself, but we'll get into that. So he says we need this like ecological conversion. In other words, it's not distinct from a religious conversion. They're pretty much the same way. So you can't profess on one side, per se, to be a Christian and then use the very environment that's part of the same creation that you are. It's again, that goes back to this, are we just inhabitants on this stage? Is it an artificial, product that's been put up for us to, interact with, or are we actually embedded within it, right? So he wants to make the point that from an environmental point of view, our concerns for the environment are not secondary. We can't put things into a hierarchical order like that. They're as primary as everything else. Now, again, I think it's easier for your generation to accept, and I'm glad for it. But nonetheless, we have a lot of work ahead of us. But he makes the point too that we're really intimately connected to all this morally. In other words, this is where I see a lot of young people that are going to have to make the switch. They have the sense for environmentalism, and they have the sense that things need to be protected. We have to make sure that we don't just rely on the state or the big government to provide the means in order to preserve the very creation we're part of. In other words, how are we going to live our lifestyle? We'll look at that in a minute. But if we're only going to look at progress as opposed to development, and we dealt with that on Wednesday, we're going to see things as just constantly incrementally growing. So unlimited growth. So, and if you're an economist, if you're a financier, or even in technology, you can't really see growth outside of coming up with the next new thing. You hear some people, and perhaps it's true to a certain extent, maybe they teach you this in a business classes that, if a business isn't growing, then it's dying. Well, I don't know. I don't agree with that. I mean, you can be quite content with the level that you're at. If you run a small diner and have seating for 20 and you're doing pretty well, you don't have to add on. People like what you have and they like the way that they have it aired. So, we can't get this idea that somehow we have this perpetual growth and that and anytime will be plateau, that's a bad thing. I don't really think that proves much, right? Um, and unlimited growth, the problem with the attitude behind this is that it often is going to be confrontational with the environment. So we can't pretend that what we do doesn't have some sort of effect. So this growth has to come at some expense. Even if we're going to talk about laissez-faire capitalism, again, the fact that we have a 40-day work week, the fact that we have laws against child labor weren't just good ideas. They were fixes that were abuses that were going on. The same way that probably, immigrant labor was used for so many years. We can go on and on, okay? So we have to determine from ourselves, from a moral standpoint, how are we measuring all of this? I mean, are we taking those things into factor? Are we just constantly craving more work hours? In other words, if we extend the work hour to 50 hours a week, are we good for that? The more that we build, the bigger our houses get, the fancier our cars get, the nicer that our vacations get, it's going to require, again, all of us to work more for those things. Something gets sacrificed. Life is all about trying to find a balance, and something always comes at the expense of the other. So a person who is quite content with living very simply, living as close to the bottom and close to nature as they want. Again, I'll go back to the 1970 song, freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. It's an easier way to get peace in your life, right? I mean, we get inundated with many things. You see how this COVID-19 sequestering has kind of pushed us into our houses. Maybe making a lot of people anxious and such, although, it's hard for me to understand that. This ought to be calm, be peaceful for us. I want to do full screen here for a second because I always like asking these questions. Has anybody ever heard of the novelist Leo Tolstoy, the Russian novelist? I want to see a hand raised. Anybody heard or read of Leo Tolstoy? Christopher, good for you. All right. Okay. He wrote quite a bit. And I'm going to give this in a real, consolidated view. He wrote this one work called How Much Land Does a Man Need? So it was about this man with his family, and, he was farming the land, and he realized that, if you have X amount of acres, you can only farm so much, and you can only make so much off what you grow. So if I can have more land, then can I just farm more? And then if I can farm more, I can grow more. And if I can grow more, I can sell more. And if I sell more, I have more profit. It's sort of like the old joke that anybody who buys a boat, the first question you ask them is, I wonder how long you'll have it. Because you go to the park next to a boat that's bigger than yours and you think, boy, wouldn't that be cool, right? So then you want the next big thing. Like that with houses, right? At some point, if you have enough money, you're looking at a bigger house and thinking, why don't we have that? Well, it's the same way with this character, and I won't give you all the names. It's Russian literature. But in Tolstoy's story, this man consistently saw the next thing as what he would want. To the point where he was very manipulative in getting more land. Well, he just wasn't satisfied, because that's the problem with this idea of incremental growth, is that we never know when's enough. When will you be content? And if you're content and you see somebody else making more than you, then all of a sudden we become a little envious and we want to play catch up and be like the neighbors. So you heard of this particular sect that were very strange, very wealthy, and they had extraordinary amounts of money. And he heard that they would offer deals for land. Quite, in other words, they would give you as much land as you want for 1,000 rubles. So he went and he met these people, and he asked them about how this worked. And they said, well, we're more than glad to do this for you. How it works is, wherever you're standing right now, you go and you walk for 24 hours in a big circle. And again, I'm making this, in a very pedestrian view. You walk and whatever you can circumscribe in one day, 24 hours, all that is yours for 1,000 rubles. Doesn't matter if you do 100 yards or if you do 100 acres, whatever you want to do. Well, the man couldn't quite believe it. He said, so you're telling me whatever I can, circle in a day, I get. Absolutely. So just like any of us, right? If somebody told you you can go into a grocery store and you got, 30 seconds to grab as much food as you want, it's unlikely you're going to like just, shelf shop. You're just going to start throwing things and see how much can I get in my 30 seconds. Well, this man thought the same thing. How much can I possibly get? Because I want to get as much as I can. I don't want to, leave 1 acre out that I could have gotten otherwise. So he figures how far out can I walk in 12 hours, you know, figuring out that I'll need 12 hours to return. But we're more tired in the last 12 hours than we are in the first 12 hours, are we not? So when he gets out to what he figures is midway, he is like just he's already went an extraordinary distance, and he's thinking, oh my God, this is more land than I could ever have imagined in my entire life. Well, he's starting back, and he's starting back. It's starting to get dark, and he realizes, that he needs to get back before sundown, or he loses everything. That was the deal. You don't get back in time, you lose your $1,000 in rubles, your 1,000 rubles. So he gets to the point where he actually can see those people that made a deal with him, and he's thinking to himself, "Oh, are they going to be mad? They're here. I'm actually doing this, and I'm going to take all this land from them for like a song. Boy, are they going to feel like fools?" And he's thinking they're going to be mad. But as it gets closer, he realizes that they're cheering him on. They're actually encouraging him. Come on, you can do it. Well, this is like perplexing for him. Why would they cheer me on? They rob them of all this land. But he has almost no energy left, and he's pushing himself to the past exhaustion. And as he gets closer and closer, they're cheering him on and cheering him on. And finally, he gets back. So he made it on time. All the land's his. They're telling him what a wonderful thing and how proud they are of him. And he dies of a heart attack. They dig a hole. They bury him. And the answer to the question, how much land does a man need? 6 feet. Tolstoy was a person of voluntary poverty. He saw the ridiculousness of trying to get more than you could possibly use in life. So this was his story. You should read it. It's not a long story, but this is his point: is that none of us are taking any of this with us. We don't live in solidarity if we think that this world's about accumulating as much as we possibly can. And it doesn't make much sense for us to work like dogs and then just die. There's more meaning to life. And moral instance, we have to consider what we do and how much we want to gather in this life, how much we want to circumscribe, how does this affect the environment? So we have to, we have to live differently. There's no other way to say it. So the document then goes on and lets you see to say, we got to choose a different lifestyle. So in other words, this is connected to the moral aspect where there cannot be a disconnect between the way that we live, the way that we see the need for preserving the environment. Now, this may sound odd. I have 3 daughters growing up, so I know what it was like to see 3 young teenagers go through their showers every day. We're talking 25, 30 minutes. They would empty out my water heater and sometimes change clothes 2 or 3 times a day. And how many towels, one for the floor, one for the hair, one for the body. And then my wife, I think we burnt through a Chem and Honey washing machines and dryers trying to take care of all of this. Well, that's a very small way to think, how does our lifestyle affect the environment? We don't think that way, right? This may sound maybe a little disturbing to you, but why isn't that we can't use one towel for 3 or 4 days? Now, before you cringe at that, come out of the shower, as clean as rubber going to be, correct? The towel's really just wet. It's not dirty, it's wet. Hang it up dry, use it for the next day. Try not to wear more than you have to. We don't, what are we? We're not Elton John. We don't need, our Lady Gaga. We don't have to have costume changes throughout the day. I don't know about your family, but my family doesn't use that, hang their laundry out. My mother did growing up. Today we use dryers. All of these things, suck up electricity, suck up natural resources that are often not renewable. And we don't always put these things together. So we have to start asking ourselves, like, where do we go on vacations? Where do we go on spring break? Where do we, how far do we travel? Do we travel for things that we don't need? All of these things, Pope Francis is saying, are part of the lifestyle that we have to see, impinges on exactly on the environment. And he makes the point then that if we can find ourselves in solidarity with those that have less than us, then we're not going to rely on the state, just a big government, to fix hunger and poverty. We're also not going to rely on capitalism because the market forces are not going to fix hunger and poverty. So here again, you're going to see on both sides of the coin, you don't really see a solution, but the solution is us, right? So he's trying to say that, all of this, has to be fixed, but it has to come from us. It can't be from something on the outside, which is why I started out with the effects of big government and also business, right? So on the social, somebody have a question? Okay. I'll give you a chance then. On the social, economic, and political spheres, then, the reality is that the climate's a common good. So the reality is it isn't something that's outside of us. It's not an artificial construct that we walk into. And how the environment gets affected is how we get affected. So in the same way that how we act in our lives has a moral implication on how the economic sphere works, how we act in our lives has a moral implication on how the environmental sphere works. And if we keep in the habit of wasting,
don't come in at that time.
somebody has your mic on. We keep in the habit of wasting and discarding, and consuming. Pope Francis says we've reached unprecedented levels, and that's affecting us. So the reality is, before I show you a short video and then we'll take some questions, is we have to understand too how our lifestyle has changed. Okay, so we're all kind of sequestered in our homes right now, and we're seeing how this might affect us, but our homes are not like they were 100 years ago. So even your bedrooms are probably not like mine was growing up. My bedroom, besides having a bed, a bureau, and a closet that was no more than 2.5 feet wide, I think my mother had a picture of the Sacred Heart up on the wall, and I had a clock, and that was it. So when you were a kid getting sent to your room, it was like getting sent to a closet. Today, for a young person to get sent to the room, it's like an entertainment factory. Well, let's think about that in terms of our houses. 150 years ago, houses were smaller. They were pretty much where people cooked and where people ate and slept. Today, they're entertainment industries. Some people have movie theaters in their house, or all kinds of game rooms and such. So how does our lifestyle, and how is it that, how does that affect our relationship with nature? Because all of a sudden, we much prefer this artificial environment than to, putting our feet on grass, that type of thing. Which brings me to this last part before I show you the video, and we'll have some discussion. Pope Francis said, concerning the breakdown of the quality of human life, many cities are huge. They're inefficient structures, excessively wasteful energy and water. We're not meant to be inundated by cement, asphalt, glass, and metal, deprave the physical contact with nature. Okay, so, people that live in urban areas try their best to make it a home, potted plants, that, back on the balcony or something. Or you live in, in Manhattan, you got Central Park. There's always like these green areas that people are looking for. There's something there for the human person. So when we start looking at what we would call an integral ecology, what we mean by that is that this is not simply an economic issue that's going on in our world. It's not simply a social, I want to say, situation that we're trying to deal with. It's a very complex set of issues. So the ecology is not just saving the planet. It has something to do with how do we understand ourselves as human persons, this theological anthropology. How does that then affect it? So what I want to do for you here, and then we're going to take some questions, is I have a video that my high school friend, Keith Harder, puts up on Facebook almost every morning. It's a lake outside of town, of the town that I grew up in. He just goes up there with his dog and sits and enjoys, the sounds of nature. He has a cabin on Susquehanna, so in the evening he's usually kicking back and watching the river flow. And there's something to that we miss, right? So as you see this, and then I'm going to come back and we're going to talk about it. What is our relationship to nature? Why do people who claim to be spiritual but not religious, why do they still find some connection to nature? What is nature's connection to our spirituality? I want you to start thinking about this so we can have a little bit of discussion before we call it a day. We're going round two. So, I'm not trying to make some sort of romantic claim in all of this. But why is it that people that aren't, let's say they're spiritual but not religious, why do you think it is that they seek nature? What is it in nature that they're looking for and that they perhaps think might fulfill something about them as a human person? What do you think?
Maybe nature can be seen as unbiased as compared to religion, because religion has the human element, whereas nature is just nature.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting, Lenora. Good. Okay. What else? Because I could talk more about that, but what else?
I think nature is often considered calming, and maybe where some people find like peace in church or in God, others who, like Lenora said, are like a little uneasy about taking the human route, they can find peace in what doesn't have any humans. So like an unbiased, like natural scene.
Yeah, there's something to it. I think, Dana, Lenora, you're hitting on something there. Isn't it true that, if you're a pet person, it's very easy to, hug the dogs and be around the cats. And oftentimes you hear people say that I have a preference for animals more so than people. Well, that I get what that comes from, but we also have to be careful, right? Because the dog and the cat doesn't really demand anything from us morally. And if we reduce nature down, and I do think what you guys said is true, but nature doesn't really compel us to go home and love the person next to us, does it? It doesn't convict us of certain things. It doesn't mean it's bad. There's something there that we're trying to really tap into. So I'm curious, why do you think nature's peaceful? I mean, there's got to be something to that. It's not just the fact that we've grown up like this and watch enough TV. Why do you think that's true?
I think personally that it's maybe because people like want to be in touch with nature due to the fact that everything's in harmony when it comes to it. So like they all depend on one another, and the well-being of one, like of a tree, depends on the climate, or just how everything is so interconnected, but at the same time lives harmoniously. I think that's the goal for people in general. So if they look to nature, maybe they can find the answers, because
I agree, Danielle. I agree.
a
I
mystery.
agree. Yeah. Well, it is. And it's like an interdependence. So it's like it should be now once, and this is from a Christian standpoint, right? Once we understand our integral relation to this, then all of a sudden we no longer see it as a scene that we are simply visiting, right? In the same way that the geese and fish and everything are all interaffected by how the environment is, like the ecosystem, we're part of that same ecosystem. So, we can still use the word subduing, but we can't understand that in the way of, of using with impunity. That would really bother, it would really disrupt the unity. I think the harmony is an aspect of that. So, you see all the different types of species get along. There is a solidarity between those, we might say, in the same way that I said a solidarity between all ethnicities and racial and economic levels should be interconnected. I mean, there's no distinctions here between those as far as their integral worth. And I think what Pope Francis is trying to say is, it was fine with Reverend Rivera to come out against socialism and crass capitalism. But we've been left with this idea that everything has to just simply progress. And we've lost our connection to the environment, which is a little more hard. It's a little more difficult for us because, again, we live in these houses that are artificial. We could be in our homes as long as we had food brought in and water, could be here for the next year. That wasn't always the case, even 100 and some years ago. So anything else? What else do you guys think? Anything you want to point out or observations?
I guess it's kind of summarizing what you were saying, but it's like you said humans lost their connection with nature, and it's kind of like nature is the perfect example of what our society should be like, but with the conflicting elements of human society, the different ideas, and the way that humans tend to resolve those ideas through conflict rather than peaceful discussion. that is kind of where people will try and connect more to nature, because they see what they should be in nature, but they find themselves blocked from trying to become what nature is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. It does. I think, you see a real interplay and solidarity. And, I think there's probably a longing in our hearts that we're wondering, why can't we do this? Why can we no longer? I remember stories when I was younger, like in grade school. I know today we call them Native Americans, but there was this one story of an American Indian who, before he killed the food that he ate, he said, I only do this out of respect for you and for me, and that I am nourished by what I have to now do. So I mean, on a certain level, somebody might find that overly romantic, but on another level, you would like to think that they would not take more than they need. But that's the challenge for us, and it's a moral challenge, right? So again, if this course is a course on justice, and if we're hoping justice brings us peace, then we do get some peace from, like I love Keith's, videos in the morning and his videos at night. They're calming, but they're calming because they're not just touching something that's effective in the human person. I think they're reaching the human person in a way that makes us stop and think that this is not just an ideal. This is what we should be doing our best to be part of. And our goal is then to take that same level of peace and harmony, which is a good word, and then bring it out into our culture. So, anybody else? All right. I'm here for anything you guys need. Other than that, you guys have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you on Monday. Okay? See everybody.
Thank you. Have a good
Thanks.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.